Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. It's Monday afternoon, it's 12:30, and that, of course, means that the Acsom Bulletin is live. I've got to say, first off the bat, I wasn't here on Friday, but I was ably assisted by Chris McElwain, aka Double Denim. Thank you very much for that. Chris, did you enjoy your first session in the hot seat?
Yeah, to be fair, I've just been talking to some of the guys on the chat there. I was expecting a few pelters after it. The guys have usually got, they've got a bit of good banter amongst them, but they were all really, really supportive and really kind. So before I say anything, I'll just say thanks to all the guys who've reached out both during and after the show. They were massively encouraging. I'm getting a few in the neck at the moment, which is fair enough, but at the time they were all really helpful. But yeah, it's one of these things that's really nerve-wracking when you're on, but you left me with Jim Orr, who just, all I had to do was really say, right, over to you, Jim, and then sit back, and that was us. So it was a good, certainly a good guest to have on. Made it nice and easy, and yeah, hopefully happily take it on again, but maybe not too soon.
Where was I? That's a big question. Where was I? I was sitting. Listen, I wasn't in the driving seat. I was sitting in a car, and we stopped at T-Bay Services, which apparently is a choice of the. I don't know if there's a hierarchy of service stations on our way down to London or whatever, but I'll tell you why we were going down. We were going down because quite a few years ago, 2018 actually, Jim Simonetti from the Jimmy Johnson Academy and myself went down to London to meet up with Gary Reeves. Gary Reeves at that time had a plan. His plan was to pull together an alliance of Celtic supporters clubs from that area. You're talking Luton, Reading, Wimbledon, all these Celtic supporters club, big clubs, and to do an annual charity football tournament in between the CSCs. In the name of the great man, Jimmy Johnson. So since then, Jim Simonetti has been involved in it every year. That's the first time I've gone down. We went down as their guests and to represent Acsom, and it was tremendous. It was absolutely brilliant. Pulled a wee video together, which we'll put up on the channel at some point. But fair play to everybody for pulling that together. And they were telling us that there's 11,000 in amongst the CSCs that are part of this alliance. There are 11,000 members down there. They don't always get tickets. Whenever they do, they're up. They struggle to get season books. They're on the waiting list, all this kind of stuff. But the dedication and their love of Celtic was incredible. There was a bit of needle. There was a couple of wee scraps and scrapes on the park. It was great to see. And I said to him, although we don't know if this is happening yet, I did say, listen, if you want us to bring an Acsom team down next year, then we'll be up for it. But rest assured, I will be putting a few ringers in that team because I think if you've got a goalie who maybe played at a level and somebody with a bit of legs who played at a level, then you'll probably do okay. Sean, don't know if you're going to be over for the tournament next year, but it would be good to pull an Acsom team together, 6 asides. I think I spoke to a guy, believe it or not, who was in one of the teams who was in his 70s. And he was still playing. I loved seeing it. But yeah, I think we could get a decent Acsom team. Who do you think it would be in it, Sean?
Oh, are we talking about, can we pull in the ex-pros? Is that what we're talking about? Or are we talking about having Jim Orr up front?
Where would Jim be? I think Jim looks like a tricky winger. Just feed Jim the ball and he will go on a rampaging run and create. I think Jim would be in the team. He's into the walking football, though, isn't he?
Well, I was going to say actually, sorry, Sean, but Jim actually spent a bit of time talking to my dad at the live event on Thursday with Stan, Tomo, and Jackie, and I think Jim spent a good hour trying to convince my dad to go and join him in the walking football. So, I think Jim's trying to get his own team together by the sounds of things.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he is an advocate of walking football. He thinks it's the future. I don't know if I'm old enough yet, but I'm kind of creeping up to that age group. Who else, Sean? Who else do you see as a midfield general or a big stopper at the back?
It's probably Chris. You can get or the young boys in, But I feel that Jerry's going to be one of these guys that tells everyone he's a goalkeeper, but then when it comes down to match day, he'll be just putting himself up front and chucking the gloves at whoever's nearest to him at some point. I played with lots of guys like that, Yeah, I'm a goalkeeper. Then as soon as they fancy it, just wander up the pitch. What do you reckon?
Rene Hugaitas style. Yeah, smell
exactly,
the glove.
Yeah.
Smell the glove
Jose
indeed.
Luis Chilavert and all that.
Oh, I remember him, absolutely.
Yeah.
Plenty to discuss, even though we are in the midst of a pre-season break, if you could call it that. The Euros then, guys, you enjoying it? I mean, what do you do when Scotland are pumped out?
I've not been watching it. I got up at 3 a.m. to watch the 3 Scotland games. And apart from that, it's just ridiculous hours for me. The games this week are all starting at midnight and 3 a.m. So I'm not getting up. And people keep asking me, are you getting up to watch the England game? And I'm like, mate, I wouldn't open my curtains if they were playing in my garden. Like, no, I don't want to watch them. And they're dog meat as far as from everything I've seen this year. So, like, if they make it to the semis, maybe I'll watch it. Probably the final, I'll get up at 3 a.m. But apart from that, it's just too unsociable for me.
Listen, it was 82 minutes on the clock last night, and they were 1-0 down, Chris. And I was the sad guy that switched it on to see them getting beat. And obviously, it didn't quite work out that way. But yeah, I mean, back in the day, I would have watched every ounce of football that was available. And I don't know if it's the modern game of it being so accessible all the time. That instant gratification, if something has to be worked for, sometimes you appreciate it a wee bit more. Wee bit of that, but also the fact that I'm just absolutely entrenched in all things Celtic more than ever before. And I think that because of that, and there's no real, there's not, Ireland's not in it, Scotland are not in it. So I might favour a team or a player or a manager, but I don't have that real invested interest. I mean, emotionally, I couldn't care less. If you know what I mean. I don't wake up the following day if somebody's been beaten out and give it a second thought.
Yeah, it's a funny one. I remember watching. I remember the first big tournament I can remember seeing was Italia '90. World Cup Italia '90, and then I think the one that I really started watching more where I had a comprehension of different players and things like that was probably USA '94, which featured a certain Henrik Larsson playing for Sweden. But that was the first time I'd seen players like Roberto Baggio, Romario, Maldini, Valderrama, a lot of guys with interesting hair, shall we say. But I remember watching that and really falling outside of Celtic, falling in love with some elements of European football. And then I used to start, because I was a Baggio fan, I started watching Football Italia, the old James Richardson programme on Channel 4. And I actually built up quite a lot of knowledge of players. Now, when I'm watching tournament football outside of Scotland, because I do enjoy watching Scotland despite the performances and results, but I tend to now try and look at it more from, and particularly as we're in the recruitment window, any players there that could end up playing for the Hoops, anyone being scouted. I always remember Martin O'Neill going to the Euros and coming back with Valharan. Is this something that Brendan's maybe doing? Are we actually watching maybe for some other teams, some players that could potentially come in and do a job for us next year? So I'm probably less enthusiastic about it now as a supporter outside of Scotland, but from a kind of Celtic standpoint, I'm looking at it to see, is there anyone there that you could conceivably see coming into the team?
Well, that brings us... Sorry, on you go, Sean.
I was going to say, at the last World Cup, we had after that the Korean boy lined up, and they never came in the end. Ended up in Germany. True. I think we got Alistair Johnson from then as well. And it's like it's those kind of fringe nations that we're scouting about, and there's nobody in the England or Germany team that's going to be of any. Even Belgium now, like you're talking about Haran. I don't think there's any Belgian players that are going to be in our market at the moment. So. It would be, we'd be looking at Georgia, for example, for the kind of, and I think there was one linked. I read today there was the Georgian goalkeeper or something, right? And then the Costa Rican boys, the other one at the Copa America that were linked with. So I agree with what you're saying, but it also has to be the ones that are hitherto unknown. That's our market. Anyone with a name, anyone that a 14-year-old that's playing FIFA knows, that's not our market.
No, absolutely. There's a huge list of players we have been linked with. You've mentioned a couple there, John. And interesting enough, Paddy Sinnott, who is a contributor to Acsom as well, wrote an article during the week or over the weekend, 20 goalkeepers who have been linked to Celtic since Joe Hart announced his retirement. It is incredible. You understand how the game works in terms of these big news sources and fan channels, etc., putting links and clickbait articles out there. That's the way it works. So you've got to try and separate the ones that might happen against the ones that won't. And we've got a wee bit of information ourselves in relation to what's happening in the transfer window, which we'll be talking about today, as well as the players who we hope will be staying. I'm going to bring this one up from Ridiculizer straight off the bat. And this is something you were talking about, players hitherto unknown, Sean. I didn't know about Kyogo. I think Liam Carrigan obviously did. But going into other markets, then you're going to unearth gems. And I think we did that. We did that under Ange Postecoglou, particularly in the Japanese market. And Liam and I have spoken quite a few times about the errors we probably made post Nakamura, not tapping into that market again. And I know he wasn't playing in Japan when we signed him, but the Japanese talent has clearly been out there in the 16-year gap between Mizuno and Kyogo Furuhashi. So let's talk about it. Ridiculizer brings it up. Is that Ridiculizer in the avatar? Have you finally revealed yourself? Or is that someone famous that I don't know about? Kyogo's decline, SPL 22-23 versus 23-24 appearances, 36 versus 38 goals, 27 versus 14. Minutes per goals, 86 versus 179. Big chances missed, 16 versus 24. Conversion rate, 31% versus 14%. Replacing damaged goods up front is a priority. Right. Okay, that's some data that Ridiculizer has shared with us. I already had Kyogo written down as a point of discussion today because not looking as deeply as that into it. I'm just looking at the season that you had to the untrained eye, to my untrained observer's eye, Chris. Clearly not being as good as the season before under Ange. Asking myself the question, is that style of play, is Kyogo suited to the way Brendan Rodgers plays? And the fact that he's 29, we've got him on a decent deal up until 2027, the summer of. Will the club be looking at this and thinking, if there's an opportunity to cash in, they will? Because it's a player that I've never once thought in my time since he came to Celtic that I would like to see him go. Even if, he was hitting his kind of peak form, I wouldn't have wanted to sell him, kind of Matt O'Reilly-esque. I wouldn't have wanted that. But will the club be looking at this and saying, well, he's not as effective under Brendan as he was under Ange. He's 29. If a bid comes in, do you think the club would play ball?
Yeah. So it's funny, isn't it? We're looking at a 29-year-old and thinking, God, his career's winding down. You're not 29 years old. That's a bit tragic when I think of my own age. But I think if they were going to take that stance and that approach and sell him, it would have to be now, because I think for me, this is the only point where they would get close to getting a fee for a player that, for me, would get close to covering what he brings on the pitch. My preference would be to keep him. I think at the moment there's not a player necessarily out there with his attributes. T-shirt slogan somebody's mentioned, apparently that's going to be mine. The word yeah, that's going to be mine apparently. But yeah, I just think what Kyogo brings to the table, there's not a like for like player out there that we wouldn't have to really pay big bucks for. So in that regard, I would prefer to keep Kyogo. I think what he offers on the park is something pretty unique in terms of the players around him. I do think his struggles could be partly attributed to the fact Brendan Rodgers came in, a new system. The fact that Rodgers is trying to fit other players into that system, not just Kyogo, I think meant that the team didn't really play to his strengths to the same extent last season, and I think Kyogo did suffer. I think the whole team suffered for that. But he still comes up in big moments. You look at the goals against Rangers, you look at the goals in Europe, you look at the some of the selfless play he has as well. I think Kyogo could continue doing that for us up until he's 33, 34. Looks a fit and healthy boy. It doesn't seem to be one of these guys that's involved in anything extracurricular that you wouldn't want to see. Keep him, build a team around him, get him a good second striker like Ida, who can maybe take on the games where it's not quite suited to Kyogo's style of play. But I think he's the best striker available at the moment, and I would prefer to keep him. We don't need to sell. As Patrick said, we've got hundreds of money. Why do we have to sell him? Why? I think the only way Kyogo leaves for me is if Kyogo initiates the move.
Well, the thing around Kyogo is I don't want to chalk up the sale of our best players. Matt O'Reilly's name will be mentioned again, I'm sure, within the next 40 minutes or so. But Sean, I'm not going to say he was unhappy, because people try and become body language experts and all this kind of stuff. He featured in every single game. Never started every game. Featured in every game last season. So he's obviously rated. And when Brendan Rodgers was asked the question around a change in style around Kyogo, he said he's not been asked to play any different. But he is. I look at that and I know, once bitten, twice shy with Celtic and the board and the way we approach things. They love having hunters of money, don't they? Do you think they'll be looking at this a wee bit differently this summer?
No, I think if you were going to sell Kyogo, the time to sell him was last season. The only way we sell him at this point is if he was going right now, it would be in the mold of the kind of Giacomakis Juranovic sale, where it was like we were kind of, oh, that kind of came out of nowhere. That wasn't a lot of money, kind of thing. And it might be, and the only way would be if we felt that. I mean, and that was a kind of Postecoglou modus operandi. And if Rodgers does decide to do that, it'll be because he's got someone that he believes is better lined up, and he doesn't want a good player, an objectively good player, stagnating on the bench. Relative to the point that Ridiculizer was making, there's a statistical argument to be made, and I've not looked into this too deep. I just chucked a couple of search terms in there while I was listening to Chris, and season on season, you would make the argument that in the previous season we had 12 assists from Jota, 9 assists from Abada, and 11 from Aaron Moy, and that adds up to 32 assists that have been removed from the team from the season before. So I think that's, and again, I'm not saying all those assists were to Kyogo, and Kyogo's not got assists from elsewhere this season, but to me, there's a talent drain that's impacted on Kyogo. But I would also say, from a subjective point of view, he didn't look as interested this season. He wasn't closing down the way he's done in the past. I don't know if that's an instruction or not. There's times where he's been coming deeper than he has in the past. There's been, I remember games under Postecoglou where he's had 4 touches this whole game. 2 of them were goals, like that kind of thing. So he's been, I don't know, and again, I don't know if it's an instruction. I don't know why he has been playing differently. He's been struggling to fit the system, but there has also been a talent drain in terms of assists. So, but yeah, to answer your original question, I don't see us selling him unless we've got someone better lined up.
I would stick with that. I would stick with what Chris says. Keep him, bring in someone like Ida. Hopefully that will happen. I think we'll get to the point of where we're looking and who we're wanting, and use his experience, because I just keep thinking back to the 2 goals, particularly against Rangers last season, where no one else on the park, no one else in Scottish football can score those 2 goals. And he has got that in his locker. Maybe he's not going to be the first pick every single week moving into next season, but I think it's great to have him. Frank Brennan, I'm bringing this up for a good reason as well. We spent 23 million quid on 10 duds last season. Fair to say they were all duds, Chris? That's the first part I would ask.
No, I think it was Bobby Petr that made the point that says you shouldn't really write players off in such a short term. But I think, I wouldn't say they're all duds. I'd say there's guys who definitely have struggled more than others. I think is fair. But I look at a player like Kuhn, for example, and I think Kuhn still looks to me like he's got the potential. Just needs confidence, needs to, I'd really adapt more to the style of football, find his position, find his tactical ability under the manager. So I look at a player like Kuhn, and he's not a player I would write off. I look at someone like Palma, and I think I view him as having probably contributed more, but I have less confidence that he's a guy that's going to continue and maintain his career at Celtic, simply because of optically things we see in terms of attitudes, and maybe not looking as though he's taking it seriously, not the same work rate, not showing some of those traits that us as supporters really respond to and resonate with us. So I would say there's definitely players there who I think look like they struggled a lot more and potentially might not make the grade. I think Duds is just, I think it's a bit disrespectful to these guys, because you got to remember, these are young guys largely in their early 20s. They're coming from overseas on a lot of occasions, some very, very far afield. It's not easy to come into a brand new team, brand new country, brand new culture, and really hit the ground running. Certainly not for the sums of money that we're paying, with the best of respect. So I think I wouldn't write anybody off completely, but I would say that there are definitely players within that group who I would have much more confidence and would potentially make an impact next year. Whereas others, I think, maybe need a loan. Maybe some are just, out of favour from a manager standpoint. Lagerbielke is a good example of that, where I think, wouldn't call the guy a dud of a player, just hasn't worked out for whatever reason. And we're saying this without insight into what goes on in the training ground, right? And how Brendan's actually rating these players and how he's listing them in terms of hierarchy. So, no, I don't think it's fair to call any players duds. But I would accept the point that I don't think all those players are going to make the grade at Celtic.
Well, yeah, looking at looking at it historically, we sign more duds than we do success. There's a lot more duds than players that make it later, right? And we can point to as many make it later as we want. You know, Ayer, Christie, even Liam Scales, for example. We can point to all of them and say, "Yep, here's your examples. Don't write players off." But then, if you're looking at it statistically, I'm sure you could find three or four for every one of those that are just absolute do not make it at all. Try to remember the boy's name that we signed. The one that disappeared to Iceland. His name's totally gone out of my head. We signed from like Aldershot or something, or Fleetwood or something like that.
Kundai Benyu.
That's the one, Benyu. Like that sort of player.
How could you forget? How could you forget?
I don't know. Like such an integral player. Koki Mizuno, Dewey. You know, there's so many more of those than there are Liam Scales, right? So and I remember in the 90s, right? You signed Isle Berkovic, like, oh, will he make it? You'd heard of all these players. Even Di Canio coming in, having played 30 odd games for Juventus or whatever, right? We're just not buying players like this anymore. We can pretend that we've heard of these players before, but unless you're absolutely spending a lot of hours playing Football Manager, there's no way you've heard of these players, right? Yeah, we don't sign too many players we've heard of these days. Even when Cameron Carter-Vickers came in, I'd just about heard of him. Do you know what I mean? Like Joe Hart was probably the last name that I can think was an absolute recognized name that we signed, and we were all kind of like, signing another Dion Dublin, another Colin Kazim Richards kind of thing, and we were proved wrong. Great, happy to be, but you know, we do this quite a lot, don't we? Where we project past results onto current players, you know, and what I try to do is, and it's hard to do this, right? And you try to just look at the talent objectively. Palma has great talent. There's no doubt about it, right? They always save the term cultured to describe a left foot. It's very rare that you hear someone say a cultured right foot. I don't know if I've ever heard it say it, but you would say it of Palma if you were going to say it of anyone. He has a wand of a right foot. As they said for Charlie Adam, his foot could open a tin of beans or whatever. I can't remember. I'm paraphrasing Ian Holloway there. So there's no question that Palma has talent, but there's also no question that Mickey Johnson has talent. And a lot of this stuff, talent is 1/3 of what you need. You know, you need a working body and you need a mental strength. And those two things are really hard to measure, much harder to measure than talent. So I agree with what you're saying, Chris. Kuhn looks more likely because he looks more physically at it as well as talented. I'd say Palma looks talented, and I'm not sure about the other two aspects yet.
Yeah, you've left me with a vision of Charlie Adam trying to open a tin of beans with his feet.
Well, Kirk Broadfoot tries to boil an egg.
That's right. I'm looking at the signings last summer because there's a lot of thought, and I get it, totally get it, because we are where we are in the transfer window. We've not signed anybody yet. There's a lot of people thinking that we're just going to follow suit to last season and sign all these guys who are being presented to us by football agents who are entrenched in this kind of thing. They know the availability of every left back in European football. Chukwuemeka Awata, I don't really put him in the category because it was a legacy deal that was going to happen. We had an obligation to buy him after the loan. But if I ask you the question of these players, if you were offered the money we paid for them, would you take the money back? Would you sell them on? Let us know in the comments section. Odin Thiago Home, £2.5 million. If we got an offer for 2.5, would you take it? I would keep him. He's one of the guys that I do think, listen, he is a project signing, and I do think he's worth keeping and developing. Marco Tilio, 1.5 million. If you got a bid for Marco to go back to Australia, would you take it? I'm going to say yes. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but it would appear that he hasn't settled, and it looks as though his destination will not be Glasgow next season. Yang. Yang's an interesting one. We paid 2.1 for Yang. I'm going to say keep him. I'm going to say keep Yang. I don't think we've seen the best of him. I think there's development there. I keep thinking back to the 3H game at Ibrox where he didn't do a simple bit of defensive play where he should have done. But I do think there's room to develop that player. Kwon, £1 million. I'll tell you what, if St Mirren managed to get £1 million and offer us that for Kwon, I would take it. Mike Nawrocki, 4.3. I'd bite your hand off for that. this pre-season. Gustav Lagerbielke, 3 million, I take it. Luis Palma, he's an enigma because I totally get what you're saying, Sean. He has got all the talent. He's got the technical side of it. Does he have the heart? Does he have the actual mentality to be a winner and take every minute in a Celtic jersey seriously? I'm not so sure. So I'll come back to that one. Let us know in the comment section. And Nicholas Kuhn, I do believe that Kuhn will come good. There seems to be a steely determination about him. When he's preparing for the games, even when I seen him going into Lennoxtown last week there, Chris, I do think he's going to come good. But of those guys, if you're offered your money back, how many of them would you keep?
I think I would agree with you, Paul Johnson.
Yeah, I was kind of nodding along with what you were saying there as you were going. I think Odin is primed for a loan, a productive loan. I think he's got a lot of the Ryan Christies about him, which we previously mentioned. I think, and I think because Nawrocki and Lagerbielke are both fringe players, so if that one you can kind of file under. Now his name's gone out of my head. Polish striker. Oh man, I'm having a nightmare tonight.
Klimala.
The one. Sorry?
Klimala, the one who went to US.
Klimala, yeah, exactly. So when we got our money back for Klimala, we're like, oh yes, thank you very much. So I would have them kind of filed under that because it is that kind of money range, and I think we're looking at that for O as well, aren't we? Getting our money back, and it feels like that's the thing that's going on this summer, doesn't it? Like a lot of the players Brendan doesn't fancy. He's just saying to Michael Nicholson or the agents or whatever, get our money back on your way, and it feels like that.
Yeah,
I think the only one I'd probably jump in. I'm conscious I'm going to have to drop off in a minute or two. Just having a job thing is a nightmare when you've got Acsom. But the one player that I would feel more certain about is if I was offered the money for Palma to let him go, I'd take it. I would absolutely take it. I just think there's players that don't fit the mould of what I like to see in a Celtic team. And as much as I agree with Sean, I think that the culture left foot is definitely there. There are other elements to his game so far in what I've seen that give me less cause for encouragement than what I've seen from Kuhn, for example. So I think if we got the money for Palma, I would take it.
Yeah. Aye, I mean, let us know in the comment section because it's an interesting take, obviously, on last summer's transfer window. With the vast majority of them, you would just take the money back and return the goods. Now, Chris, as I said, he's going to head off and do some work now. Chris, I've got to thank you again for last week. Allowed me to go down to London and rub shoulders with some of the CSCs down there. Great
Absolute pleasure. Guys, honestly, it's a pleasure as always, and apologies I can't stay longer, but look forward to coming on again later this week, maybe.
We'll see you again, my man. Nice one.
Have a good one. Thanks,
Have a good one. And another big thing, I've not finished with your comment, Frank. I'll come back to that in just a wee second. I just need to sort out this background because it'll absolutely go crazy with my OCD if I don't. There we go. Right, who's doing the business? That's a big question, and it's something that if you noticed last week, Brendan Rodgers wasn't at training. He wasn't at training. He didn't give the first interview of the new season. It was John Kennedy that gave it. He's obviously up to his eyeballs in transfer deals, dealing with agents, large agencies, etc. And he is obviously working alongside Michael Nicholson. How unusual is that, do you think? After the decision-making stage, Sean, how unusual is it to have somebody who's your CEO being involved in this part of the game? Is it something that's quite old-fashioned these days?
I think it is, and mate, I'm quietly furious about it, to be honest. Like these transfers are, how much are we even spending on agent fees alone? Millions upon millions, right? Why have we not got? Again, I don't know what the market's like, but surely there's someone out there we could pay $100,000 a year to whatever, and that's their full-time job. And then we're not waiting until June to roll Brendan Rodgers down to London to do negotiations for us. Looking at, I do think there is a role for the manager, because I think if you're a player and you get a phone call from the first team manager, oh, they actually want me, or this is a big name, he's talking to me. This is not just my agent lining something up. These guys do want me. So I do think there is a role for the manager, but I think this should be well ahead. We should be having, like we had before, we should be having deals ready to go once the transfer window opens, and you need someone full time to be doing that sort of thing. I'm not into this whole, yeah, we had deals and they fell through and blah blah. I'm not interested, man. If you want something done, Just get it done. Have someone make it their full-time job. If you need to pay 10% more to get it done early, pay 10% more. What's the point in bringing, you mentioned it earlier, what's the point in bringing in 10 players for 20, whatever it was, million? Bring in the 3 you want for 14, 15 instead of rolling that dice. That's that. And I'm honestly, I'm not happy about the way it's gone. We've been distracted by Scotland at Euros. That's done now. There's been some minor distraction with building permits in Glasgow. That's kind of getting old news now. But yeah, now we need to see some. Yeah, it's still funny, yeah. But we need to see some tangible movement now. We've lost players. We already knew we were light. I think we've lost 4 players and gained none, if that's correct. 2 lone players, Joe Hart retired, and Haksabanovic, yeah, and I think O is on his way, and a couple others. So yeah, it's not, and the squad is inflated. So I don't think the idea is to inflate the squad. I think the idea is to add quality. Don't want a lot of players, just want a few good players, and to have nothing lined up. I'm not buying the Euros as an excuse for things being delayed. There's only 12 teams left and 12 countries left in the Euros, so it was suggesting that Spain and Germany still being in Euros is the reason that we're not signing these players. Come on. Copa America? Maybe. Don't feel like that's the case. Again, they're down to half the numbers now. Mm-hmm. I literally can't believe that we've got to this stage. The ones before, Alistair Johnson, the deal was effectively done before the World Cup. And then look at the Korean lads. We didn't have that done before the World Cup, and then it didn't happen. So get your business done early. I don't care if it costs 10% more. Pay someone, make it their full-time job. It should not be Michael Nicholson's full-time job that you job sharing with Brendan Rodgers. It's pretty... It's not of this time, is it?
It's infuriating because I think what happened to myself a couple of years ago, I was given a presentation around recruitment, and a big part of that, Sean, kind of blew my mind. It was the data side of it at that point. And I know we've got some great data guys within the Celtic world who have podcasts, and obviously we're blessed to have Alan Morrison jumping on once a month at least onto a Celtic State of Mind. So the data thing isn't new, I get it, but the fact that it's not new, and when you're talking about data in recruitment, the fact that it's not new makes me even more infuriated that we're still at this stage where it really is the manager of the football team, the CEO of the football club, and probably, I think the name that I mentioned the other day was our head of scouting, who is Joe Lefevre, formerly of Arsenal. He will, I'm supposing, be in the mix as well in relation to that. But when you don't have a head of recruitment and you don't have a real setup when it comes to, right, I need a left back. What if it's an emergency? I need a left back because we've had an injury crisis. Like we had last season, we had a centre half injury crisis. Okay, straight off the bat, who are Celtic already interested in? Not who should we be interested in post the emergency. Who are we already interested in? We should always have a short list of every single position. Right, is he available? Because he's at the top of the list. If not, we can move down. And it doesn't seem as though it's almost as if we're, rinsing, repeating constantly. And it's just like reset, let's go again. No, you should already have this bank. And I think back to that conversation in January, which happened on the Monday, apparently, between an agent and Brendan Rodgers, which resulted in Adam Eder coming to Celtic on the Wednesday. Because if that hadn't happened, if that conversation doesn't happen, we don't win the double, Sean.
Mm-hmm. That's probably a fair point. Yeah. Bernardo was the 2 lone players combined for the goal that wins us the cup, and they're both gone now. So we're tangibly weaker than we were when we won the double.
Yeah, we are.
It's frustrating. It is frustrating. I get there's still time, but Celtic are already selling Celtic TV subscriptions to the games that are coming up. So are they expecting us to buy into that and then believe that there's still plenty of time? Excuse,
No, this is the thing. We've just announced. Obviously, the season ticket sales super sold out. So the way I understand that is every season, for one reason or another, 1% of the season tickets are not uptaken and renewed. They go to the vast waiting list and they get sold pretty easily. So the season tickets have sold out. We've launched our new jersey. As you say, the Celtic TV subscriptions are globally being sold. And it's not about being a spoilt brat who's demanding 5-10 million pound players here. It's about knowing that last season we won the double by a whisker. We won the double by a whisker. And from that team, we've already lost Joe Hart, Adam Ida, Paulo Bernardo. There's other players that are leaving the club, Haksabanovic being one of them, which I think I totally agree with that. Rocco Vata, not quite sure yet. There's been no resolution to that. But it does lead us on to that question. And I know we have spoken a lot about Rocco in this discussion here, Sean, right? And I think the reason for it, it's not favouritism. It's not because his old fella played for Celtic and he's a cult icon and he's played for the various teams that Acsom have been involved in, you know, with the charity element, etc. It's not about that at all. I mean, if the boy wasn't a player and didn't have ability, we wouldn't be talking about him. 6 substitute appearances, 19 years of age. He's now out of contract with Celtic. He's now out of contract. And if he goes to Watford or one of the other, supposedly 15 teams who have been interested in him, Celtic will be paid 237 grand in compensation. I guess the question is, it shouldn't really be will we or won't we keep him. It should be, should we be in this situation at this stage? He's out of contract. We're going to get a pittance if he does go. No one knows what he's going to achieve in the game, Sean. Absolutely. I can't sit here and say he'll be a £10 million player. But surely with what he has achieved so far, both on the international level, underaged, and when he's been given a chance, we should have had him signed up. Unless of course, that the demands are night and day, that we're on two different ends of the spectrum. But should we be in this position, do you think?
Well, I think that's a separate issue from the not having signed any players, and I think it's more of a long-term issue, right? And it's about how many players actually make it into the first team. Stephen Welsh kind of is about the most recent one, before Ralston, there and thereabouts. But really, we've only had 3 kind of first team regular players come out of the academy in recent years, and that'd be your Forrest, McGregor, Tierney. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, that's about it, right? That have really come in and been first team regulars. So I wonder if that's an impediment to it. But then I don't know, like what is it that's attracting them to these other clubs? I'd be surprised if it's just money. I think money's probably a part of it. We can't really compete with English teams hoarding players. And look, they've tried UEFA, one of them have introduced a rule to try and stop that. It doesn't look like it's going to make any blind bit of difference at the moment, to be honest. Limiting the number of players that are allowed to put on loan, they're still going to hoard them and just keep them in their B teams, aren't they? And this is all a consequence, really, of 2 things, which is one, the homegrown quota issue, and I think the hoarding kind of started when Man City paid 25 million for Fabian Delph, or whatever it was they needed to tick that box so that they had more than 18 players in their squad, whatever it was. So I think it goes back to that, and everyone else is suffering the consequence of that at the moment, where English teams now would rather not pay 25 million for Fabian Delph and would rather spread that money across 40 under players that they don't know. Like, for example, Liverpool signing Danny Wilson from across the city, and where's he? You know, it's just the way it is at the moment, and it's broken, to be honest. And I do worry about it, and I don't think it's a Celtic specific issue, even though I do think we can do more to mitigate this problem. You know, I should say what that more is, I don't know.
No, but this is the thing, obviously, as fans, the frustrations, we share the frustrations. We don't all know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. And we might be critical in certain aspects that will be under control, but it does feel as though we can do better. That's for sure. Now, the comments we've made around Adam Ida have brought a few comments through, so we're going to be looking at them. But Pat, it's our understanding that there was an offer made to Rocco. So he is a free agent, but he's also free to accept the offer from Celtic, isn't he? So depending on what happens, and I think the front runner appears to be Watford, we may or may not lose that player. Now, I said I'd come back to Frank because we spent £23 million on 10 duds, he says, last season, and all on Brendan's watch, even though he just plays a part in the recruitment process, and they only added to our already multiple dead wood. I do think we need to get rid of a lot of players, but I don't think, Sean, that we have to wait for that before we bring any new guys in. I couldn't see that as an excuse. And again, yeah, you could be left with an even more bloated squad. I get it. But if you can move Haksabanovic on quickly enough, as we did, O seems to be on his way as well. Benji Siegrist, he's gone to Australia. He won't be back. You will be able to move on the vast majority of these guys who are surplus to requirements. I think when you move into maybe Mike Nawrocki territory, it might be difficult. James McCarthy, for other reasons, unless you tear up his contract and pay him out, might be difficult to move on. But I don't think we should be holding off to see where we are with the squad. I mean, listen, I know it's a bounce game, but we're playing Ayr United on Friday. That's the first game of the season. Ayr United this Friday. So you would hope to see some kind of movement. The reason I'm saying that we're not going to be spending the summer taking punts is because there were rumours over the weekend there in relation to that. And from what I've heard, that's not the case at all, Sean. That's not going to be the approach. I know we've been linked to Luke McCowan and players like that. From what I'm hearing, it is going to definitely be quality over quantity. If it's not, I think we're going to basically lead our fan base into a scenario of next season being very frustrating, because last season wasn't it?
Well, at the moment, the quality and quantity are perfectly equal. They're both sitting on 0. So obviously that's not come to fruition yet. But yes, that's obviously the strategy we've all been shouting for. I think at the moment against Ayr United, if we have everyone available, it's going to be Bain in goals with Matthew Anderson at left back, or whoever else across the rest of the back line. It's not looking too handsome at the moment. But yeah, look, if you want to put a positive spin on it, cool. Get Matt Anderson in. He's just had a year playing. He was voted in the team of year in the Austrian second division. The counter argument for that is, would we have signed the best left back from the Austrian second division last year and stuck him in the first team? I don't know if I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but I'll often wonder about this, about players going out on loan, and if they were performing the way they do on loan, would we identify them as potential Celtic signings? And you could also say, Chris Iyer, when he was playing at Kilmarnock at centre back, would we have looked at the way he played at Kilmarnock and went, he would do for us? But then he came in and had great games in Europe for us, so went for 14, 15 million. So it's tricky. It's not a one for one thing. It's not an exact science. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's getting all very. In some ways it's good that it's opaque, but then on the other hand it's frustrating. And all these names are just getting randomly dredged up, or either internet rumors or agents putting their players in the window. But I just want to see something. I wish something had been done already. At least one or two had been done already, and then we're not kind of in this boat now. Although that said, maybe we would be. I'm sure last year when we signed 10, we were probably saying the same thing, right?
What was the feeling during that pre-season? I would need to go back to have a look at some of the bulletins, but I think there was a sense to a certain point, right? Okay, these guys might have been lined up. When's the first Brendan signing coming in? I think there was a kind of sense of that, Sean, last pre-season. Mm-hmm. It was almost as if, right, Tillio, that's definitely not a Brendan Rodgers signing, is it? And then he confirmed it by saying, I've been getting tracked for 2 years and all that kind of stuff. And then it gets to that point, looking back now with hindsight, which is great, Nat Phillips was probably the only guy that Brendan Rodgers had anything to do with. Now, again, as Ridiculizer, I think, said earlier, or Frank said earlier, Brendan Rodgers has to take responsibility. Not full responsibility, but he's the gaffer. And he said that a lot of these deals were already too far down the line. Yeah, but I mean, we might not even get our money back on them. So cancel the deal, move on, find somebody that you are going to play, that is going to be an asset to the football club. Because if everybody knows, the team that started the Scottish Cup final was full of players that had been signed pre-Brendan returning. They were all guys that, had already been at the football club. None of the new signings made that impact. Obviously, the two loan guys came on and did that. Now, Ridiculizer isn't impressed with some of the supposed targets. Signing Dubravka at 35 years of age makes no sense to Ridiculizer.
Joe Hart was 34 when he signed.
That worked with Joe Hart. I think that we're in a situation where we need 2 goalies anyway, and so we will probably see a wee bit more. The word is that we are indeed looking for 2 goalkeepers, 2 forwards, a winger, a number 8, a number 6, and a left back. And when I was told that information, I thought to myself, where's the centre half? That's my biggest concern there, Sean. Is there someone at the football club that Brendan thinks I can do a turn with? Because I think we need one. We need a starter.
If that information is correct, then that assumes that Scales and Carter Vickers are going back out as the starters again. Because if we're going with the same as we had before, that was the 2 that were preferred. So unless he thinks having a body of work with Nawrocki in the background is elevated them above Scales, it seems like that we're going with as is at centre back. I mean, I don't. When Carter Vickers came back, we looked much more solid. We looked much more shaky when he was out of the team, but I'm not sure that's good enough for Champions League. And we're going to be playing 8 Champions League games. Look, I might be wrong. Maybe if we do improve at left back, then that does make Scales look even better. Because, Scales looks better when Carter Vickers is there. So maybe if he gets a Kieran Tierney alongside him, he looks even better. I don't know. Like, these guys get paid a lot of money because they can see things that I can't see, but I don't know. As you said, it's a long shopping list, and if it's going to be quality throughout, are we shopping in the SPFL? Are we shopping in the Premiership? Look, we've had success in the past, but it's been short-term success. I still remember when we had Hartley and Robson on the bench, and we bring them off on for a game after we lose. Who was it we lost to? I think we lost home to Motherwell or away to Motherwell, and then we brought them in for a game against Motherwell again 2 weeks later, and then they play every game after that point, and Strachan wins the league, the Tommy Burns season. So we've had success using the best from the Premiership before, but then you also have your signings like, it comes back to, you can pick examples that support your argument either way, doesn't it? For every Stephen Fletcher, there's a Will Flood, etc., etc. So like, could have had John McGinn, got Joseph Mullen, but I don't know, man. Who are the current best batch in the Premiership? If you're going off that shopping list, you'd have Miofsky up front, Danny Armstrong on the wing, probably Luke McCowan or one of the other midfielders from Dundee in there, because they did boss it against us when we were down at Dens Park, their midfield. And you'd probably have Mitov, who's just signed for Aberdeen. Did he just sign for from St Johnstone? They're probably the best of the batch from that shopping list. But is it the quality we want? Probably not. No. We probably want a little bit more, and that's, you would hope that's identified. We're sad that it's not already been done. We're frustrated that it's not already been done.
We are frustrated, and I think that as the weeks go on, you'll be able to gauge that frustration by tuning into a Celtic State of Mind, and we can see it in the comments as well. A couple of guys who've been mentioned quite a bit over the last few weeks, a wee update on where we stand with them. Scott McKenna, yes, there was interest by Celtic, but the big issue at the moment is the fact that he's actually accustomed to a wage in the high 30s weekly. So you're looking at that initially as an issue. But on top of that, he's expecting the fact that he's a free agent would allow the football club to aggregate £3.5 million of a transfer fee into his wages. So wherever he goes, he's going to be on a bumper pay packet. And it's not something that Celtic's going to pay out. You're not going to be paying 40 grand a week for Scott McKenna. Some people reckon that it will be a case of Copenhagen being interested, but by all accounts, they're not interested either, having, I think, seen him in 16 games last season. Kieran Tierney, obviously enough, the injury, apparently it's a 4 or 5 month layoff, Sean, for Kieran Tierney. So he was someone who was on the radar, and it was between Celtic and Bournemouth, but that's obviously off the table now. So even if those 2 deals were something that we were working on, neither of them, unless McKenna brings his wage demands down, are going to happen. I didn't mind the McKenna links. And Tierney, I like Tierney as well before he's injured. I like Tierney. Yeah,
I like both in the tick boxes in terms of quotas that we need to fill, and quality and quota. I often wonder about the signing on the wages thing. Like even when it's not free agents per se, but like players that we want to bring in that have wage demands that are above our wage structure. For example, I assume we still go with the wage structure that the captain is the highest paid, in which point nobody can get paid higher. if we want to maintain that wage structure, I don't understand why we're not doing the opposite thing that Scott McKenna's talking about and give them big signing on fees, and therefore they're still within the wage structure. I don't understand why we don't do that, to be honest. Maybe there's some legal or tax. Maybe it's a tax related thing. It probably is that, but I don't understand why we don't maintain our wage structure in that manner, because it's not like. It feels like that is the problem at the moment, is we don't want to open the floodgates on the wage structure by breaking it, but at the same time it's restricting our market more than it should be and more than it has in the past. This is just a layman's observation.
No, but it's a good observation. My man says, a regular contributor to the comment section. Good to see you on the YouTube channel. We can't possibly start the season with Scales. He kept his place last season for continuity. I agree. I think Scales has done exceptionally well. He's been talked up by Brendan Rodgers, one of the biggest successes of his career in relation to the circumstances around him coming back into the side and playing a huge amount of games. Not quite every game, but he was up there. He played a huge amount of games last season. But for me, he's a backup. And it leads me on to the right back position. Alistair Johnston is at the moment in the Copa America. They've done pretty well. He's played in all 3 games, and actually they're playing, I think, on Saturday. Venezuela is their next game. It's the quarterfinals, and he's been getting bigged up. I was just having a look at him this morning. Still only 25 years of age, Sean, Alistair Johnston. Now, at the beginning of last season, I asked the question. I put it out there on the comments. Were coming in. I said, who are you comfortable with going into a game in the Champions League? That was a question. Who do you think you're quite happy with? Now, I'm not meaning they're going to win you the Champions League, Sean, but you think, right, they can step up. And the list of players that I mentioned last season were Joe Hart, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Rio Hatate, Matt O'Reilly, Callum McGregor and Kyogo. That was the 6 that I mentioned. There was quite a few people coming in suggesting Alistair Johnston was in the mix there as well. I didn't think he was at the time. We've lost Joe Hart. There are rumours around Matt O'Reilly. So at the moment, in my list, I've still got 5. I still believe the 5 guys on that list are good enough for the Champions League. Do you think we've got any more? Do you think Alistair Johnston's in that group of players?
I think he's on the borderline. I think before he got that ankle injury, it would definitely have been. Since that ankle injury, he's been very inconsistent. I think he's still very good on his day, but his consistency has dropped since then. I think that is a thing. I think there's a mental recovery from an injury as well as a physical recovery. You see it like in the NFL when a quarterback gets an ACL. Physically, they're fine a year later, but they still wear a knee brace and they still move differently. And it's more just, and then maybe a year or 2 later, they'll shake that off. So I actually do think Alistair Johnston could get back to that level that he was at before. And I think you're probably right. He would be the next kind of the line there for that. After that, he'd be the player on that line. You can make like Liam Scales got man in a match right in a Champions League game, so it's hard to really say what does it really mean to be a Champions League player. But yes, I think you're right with your summation there.
Yeah, and then you think, well, if Joe Hart's left as he has and Johnston takes us back up to the half a dozen players, Sean, we can't sign half a dozen of that calibre of player. A lot of people in the comments say, we've got the money, yes, we can. I don't think we're going to in this window. But going back to a point you made, what if we did sign 3 or 4 who you felt were that of that quality? And then
Scott McKenna, Scott McKenna was Champions League last year.
Yeah,
he's a Champions League player.
He is, and you think to yourself, at that stage, we might have a chance to get into that group of between 9 and 24 that will take us into the next level of the Champions League, and that surely would be regarded as progress. Now, I'm bringing this in, Brown Warrior. Well spotted, yeah. We're looking for a number 8. Then O'Reilly is definitely getting punted. The latest rumours around Matt O'Reilly is that Southampton are interested, Sean. Is it a case of just sorting out the fee now, or do you think he could be a Celtic player next season?
I think there's a chance he's a Celtic player. I think it's a small chance. I think it's only if something that he doesn't. It doesn't eventuate something that he wants. I think even if Southampton do come in for him, I think it will be on probably with a release clause to a higher team if he does. I'm surprised Tottenham aren't in for him, to be honest. I thought Ange would know that he's got the talent to do a job for him. But yeah, like I thought it would be higher up the league, but I think it's funny money down there at the moment, isn't it? 35 million for Elliot Anderson and the likes. So I don't think they're going to sniff at 30 million for someone with again, he's proven it at Champions League level. Again, man in a match in Champions League. So I don't think they're going to sniff at that. And I'm surprised that there's not more teams in for him, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Would be surprised if, we said in the past in relation to the ambition of the player and the fact that, we heard in January that Matt O'Reilly had interest from Atletico Madrid. There was an offer at the time. Again, you might know better. Something around financial fair play meant that the offer was a loan deal to buy Sean at that time, which Celtic did not entertain. There was another offer from Turkey after our window had closed shut. There was, I think, Fenerbahce were interested in Matt O'Reilly. If he was to go to England, Southampton, is that really the move for him? Listen, Celtic would be looking at the transfer fee and then the player would need to make the decision. I hope that he does stay, because it's then getting to a point of, will we ever have 6 Champions League players all at the same time in the same side? Because if not, you're going to struggle to progress in that particular tournament. The reason I brought up Alistair Johnston is I do think he's one of the best players in our squad. Obviously, on the back of the Euros, not an opportunity to take a dig at Tony Ralston. I felt a bit sorry for him, actually. Don't think he was really prepared for that level. He hasn't played a great deal of football.
He looked rusty at the start, but he grew into it, didn't he? He looked good by the third game, I thought.
With Ralston, that no matter what, he's going to have the character. He's never going to lie down and just take a beating. But the thing with that is, it did raise a question. Alistair Johnston is undoubtedly your first choice, Sean. Are you happy with the second choice being Tony Ralston going into another campaign?
I am, yeah. And I think, obviously, we talk about it a lot. Champions League quality, blah, blah, blah. And I think he's just below Alistair Johnston's level. I think Alistair Johnston's got more of an attacking asset, but I think Anthony Ralston's physicality and mentality really elevates him to above where his talent alone would get him, and he's got that in spades. I think he is a mentally very strong player and a physically very strong player. And I've actually said in the past, and I remember last year they were talking about putting. Or was it the year before? At some point, they were talking about putting Alistair Johnston in as a auxiliary centre back, and I was like, "Why is nobody considering Anthony Ralston for this role? He is absolutely solid. He wins everything in the air. I'm surprised. I would even be considering it now, even in this conversation. I don't know why nobody's ever thought of putting him there, but I'm very happy with Anthony Ralston in our squad. And I remember when we re-signed him just before he had his breakout. I was saying to myself, oh yeah, these English teams, they all have 2 left backs, 2 right backs, and someone who can go on either side. I'm like, yeah, Anthony Ralston can be our fifth fullback. And now I'm like, no, he's our second choice right back. He's when I'm happy coming into this team when for rotation or when Johnston's injured, and I'm happy for that to continue.
It's incredible when you look at the situation you mentioned there, where he was given that 1-year deal by Ange Postecoglou, and around about the same time, so was Lee Griffiths, and how both those players' careers have gone since then. Ridiculizer, here we go. All evidence over the last 2 windows would seem to contradict the headline. The headline being, we're not going to be taking punts all summer on project players. Paddy Lavery is blaming Jerry Taylor for the call that he got last week from wee Joe Miller. Paddy was the subject and the recipient of the section of our new show, which is called When a Legend Calls, Sean. And Joe Miller phoned Paddy Lavery. Paddy cottoned on to who it was, which was quite impressive. And it was part of last week's This Is Acsom. It went out on Friday night and it's gone down a storm. I thought Joe Miller was brilliant. He's got a right good tale to tell, playing his first reserve game for Aberdeen at the age of 14 and being part of the Clyde team at 37 years of age that beat Celtic in the Scottish Cup. There's a great picture of him and Roy Keane on that.
Did he play that day? I remember he was his assistant manager, wasn't he?
Came on, Sean.
He came on, yeah.
Wee Joe. There's a great picture of Wee Joe and Roy Keane, and you think to yourself, wow. I can't remember the paths crossing, but it did happen.
Roy Keane's debut, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
The funny thing was, I looked this up recently. That was like 5 days or something like 6 days after we beat Hearts 3-2. I don't remember that 1st of January game. We were 2-0 down at Tynecastle, and that was when Hearts were second in the league at that point. And we came back to win 3-2. And it was like, yes, we're on an absolute high here. And then we go out and just get and deservedly beaten by Clyde as well. Not just like, not smash and grab. Clyde could have been 3 or 4 up at the break.
I know. It's horrendous when you watch it back. They had 2 goals chopped off, Sean.
Is that
scary?
Looked good goals. They did. I think maybe one of them was right, but the other one should have been a goal.
It is scary. So if you've not watched it already, go and watch the Joe Miller episodes, and we will be recording another one this week as well. Half man, half pie. This will be the windows that Rodgers stays or leaves. If he's not back with quality, then he's off ski. More should be going than coming in. I think the biggest concern around that will be the fact that he was clearly unhappy with the transfer window last summer. And if we don't perform better this time round, he's bound to look at the situation and say, why have we not sorted this? We've had a year to get this in place and it's not happened. So there is a concern, but no knee-jerk at this stage. We're going to be covering the progress every single day at 12:30 on the Celtic State of Mind, of course. We had a tremendous week last week. As I say, we went down to London on the Friday. On the Thursday, we were live at Barazat and Design with Alan Thompson, Jackie McNamara and Stan Petrov. First time I've ever met Stan Petrov. What a gentleman, absolute gentleman. Funny wee guy as well. Very emotional when he was telling the story of his journey back from serious illness. And he got a great reception as well. Following morning, up and away down to London. The big smoke for a country bumpkin like me. This is a big deal. And it was a Jimmy Johnson tournament. It was the 5th year. A big shout out to the following. Mark Bunker of Luton's CSC, who won the Golden Boot. We had the Harrow Shamrock winning the plate, and Luton CSC won the cup. Now, the thing is, Sean, Luton CSC won it. The previous winners were none other than the Shamrock CSC that Brian Degnan is attached to. So obviously, we need to ask Brian, where did it all go wrong? Brian, when you're on this week, we'll ask you the question, mate. Yes, Acsom, who should we take down? Who do you think would be the midfield general in the Acsom team? Who's the goalie? Is that an obvious one? Is it Jerry Taylor? And who would be getting the goals? It does. I just see Jim Orr as a tricky wee winger, a wee left and right winger. But anyway, let us know your thoughts. Where am I playing as well, Sean? You need to give me a game. Or am I the gaffer?
Oh, I think you look like a fullback, Paul. I don't know.
If it wasn't for that dodgy elbow, I'd have made the grade. How many people do you speak to that says that? What a nonsense. They just weren't good enough. They weren't good enough. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved. That's been a busy one. 1,300 strong, Monday afternoon. Big shout out to Sean for joining us all the way from Australia. I'll let you get back to your evening. And every single one of you, if you haven't already, check out This Is Acsom. It's our new show on YouTube. Give us a big thumbs up. Like, hit the notifications bell, subscribe to the channel. And if you want to see our next gig with Joe Ledley, tickets are on sale and going really fast. I don't think Joe's done a great deal of gigs, but he's coming up to Glasgow on the 26th of July with a Celtic State of Mind. Ticket link is underneath the video. Join us again tomorrow at 12:30. And all that's left for me to say, Sean Conley, thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.